It's in progress. All right. This is another Demi. I don't involve me mini episode. We're doing Across the Spider-Verse, people. And I'm excited. This movie's really, really, really good. I'm gonna just say this to start off. One, I'm really, really happy I watched The Flash before I watched Across the Spider-Verse. Because Across the Spider-Verse does the multiverse a lot better than The Flash does. Just a lot better, a lot more in sync, cohesive. It makes sense. Where the Flash was kind of like you questioned a little bit of it. There's like plot twists, not plot twists, plot holes that you just kind of like, I don't know how this works. And they're just like, don't think about it. Just go with it. So Across Spider-Verse, this movie's excellent. I'm not even gonna like hover. I'm not gonna, I don't know what I'm saying. This movie's good. The animation is amazing. The acting's amazing. The music, the score is amazing. It's all amazing. And honestly, I can just say Across the Spider-Verse, it's great. It's wonderful. I was a big fan of the first one, Into the Spider-Verse. I think it's probably my favorite Spider-Man film of all time. And I say this, in regards to Spider-Man 2, very good. Doc Ock, good villain. He's not my favorite villain in this series, but Spider-Man 2 is really good. Far From Home, not Far From Home. No Way Home was up there, but Into the Spider-Verse is just one of those films that just really caught my attention because the animation was just excellent. It's one of the best animation styles I've ever seen. It's one of those animation styles where I'm like, damn, this like every little scene, little bit of change is just beautiful. It looks like a comic book. It feels like a comic book. And that's why Into the Spider-Verse was such a just like a love of mine. Like you can see background. I'm really much into the comic books. Ultimate Spider-Man, Miles Morales was probably one of the first, I think one of the first three books I've ever read personally. I was really into Walking Dead to start. I was really into the Injustice series because I just like the lore of that game. And once Miles Morales kind of came around, I started reading those comics. And those comics, the story definitely gripped me. Ultimate Spider-Man in general just gripped me. So when they heard that they were finally doing a Miles Morales and they kind of did the story, I was excited. Well, less excited when they just announced it was like a multiverse Spider-Verse because I thought Miles Morales' story was just excellent to begin with. The whole him and his uncle is just a great storytelling feature. But what makes this great is they blended those aspects on top of blending the Ultimate Spider-Man aspects of that story on top of adding the multiverse, and they did it beautifully together. It was top notch. Animation was top notch. Music score was top notch. And Across the Spider-Verse somehow tops that. Animation's even more beautiful. Every universe they go into has its own style. Spider-Gwen, if you ever read Spider-Gwen, her um her comic is very colorful, very much in touch with emotions. So like a way a character is feeling, that's how the comic is. This movie does that. You see like this beautiful art rendering that makes you feel like a painting, or it makes you seem like it's a painting in the background, kind of illustrating how the character feels. And they do that in her universe only. And in other universe, you just see different styles. You see the Lego. I guess I'm spoiling here. There's Lego Spider-Man universe in it. You see Spider India. You see Miles Morales. You see two different universes. And one of the universes he jumps into is a nod to one of his more recent comics. And unless you read the comic, you don't really get that. And this is what this film is so great. It's because everything's top notch. Animation's top notch. Music somehow is better than before. The score just I found myself just bopping along to the score of the music. They throw in different songs in there, just like, and it just flows naturally to it. Before I get into the story, because I feel like the story is where this movie kind of, I wouldn't say fails. It doesn't fail whatsoever, but it's lacking. Not the story itself, but I'll get into the story part and where it's lacking. But I just want to say the cameos and just all the little Easter eggs in this film, just like the Spider-Verse, there's so much, so much Easter eggs to be had, so many different characters that just pop up, how many different cameos, and it just never feels out of place. The Flash did this, and it felt like it was a lot more fan service than it was actually fulfilling a storytelling feature. Whereas in Spider-Verse, it is definitely fan service. There's definitely some cameo appearances you just weren't expecting. You're like, aha, but it worked in the story. It worked in the telling the world of, hey, this is a world of and story of multiple Spider-Man, and it just feels natural. So you see all these Spider-Man from different universes. You see Spectacular Spider-Man. You see Donald Glover's Prowler. You see other Spider-Man from different stories, and it just feels in place. And there's different videos of different past movies, and it just feels like it belongs. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel any. This movie does it well. So where does this story fail? It doesn't fail. Um, this movie doesn't fail at all. But I think where it lacks is the storytelling aspect of it. So getting into the story definitely dives into Gwen Stacy more. It starts off, opens up, and her kind of showing how her and her father are not quite seeing eye to eye, and how she's not being able to reveal herself as Spider Woman, and he's against Spider Woman, a very classic Spider Man tale, right? The parent or the guardian or the captain is against Spider Man, or Spider Woman. The Spider Person is trying to debate whether or not they should tell them or not. And there's a lot of this is very intentional because a lot of characters are feeling this. A lot of Spider characters are feeling this, and there's a whole attention to it. And they just dive into detail a lot more with Gwen Stacy, and you just feel for her character. And then that's where a vulture of a different universe comes in, and boom, she gets introduced with Miguel O'Hara. And then you get Miles Morales' story, which is he's feeling something, he's dealing with something very, very similar. He wants to tell his parents that he's Spider-Man. He keeps getting in trouble. He's late for class. He's lying to his parents. Everyone knows that something is up with Miles Morales, but he doesn't want to say it. And that's kind of like the arc. And there's a whole point to this because that's where the story goes. They talk about what they call canon events in the story. And it's all about allowing canon events to happen, which is where you see characters seeing different things from different point of perspectives. And it's just such an interesting concept. It's an interesting philosophy, right? Do you allow bad things to happen for the good of the world? It's one of the philosophical debates of all time. And it's just, I love when movies kind of get into it. It's overplayed a little bit, but I think this story does it very, very well. And so it brings Miles into this interesting world. And another thing I want to get into, I don't have this like written out or planned. I kind of just do this on the top of my head. So I'm sorry if I'm kind of going all over the place. I don't know how to generally naturally how to do it without trying to pitch you like my thoughts. I want to just tell them naturally. Maybe in time I'll have it more written out. So let's get into the characters because I think the characters in this movie is just as great as the characters in the first. One, Miles Morales, you get to see a lot more. You get to see him as Spider-Man. Great. One of the villains of the story, the Spot, is just so wonderfully played because he's trying to be the arch nemesis of Miles Morales. And it's funny because he's just like, this is the fight of our lives. Like for the Spot, it's just like it's so important for him. And Miles is just like, you're just some dude. And it's funny to just see how a villain is powering up. It's one of those things you just don't see that often. Surprisingly, you don't see villains powering up, trying to be that arch nemesis, and you get like this background and you get this importance of like why Spotting is important. And another thing I really love about this film is they don't take the first movie and make it unimportant because I feel like a lot of sequels do that where, oh, you remember what the big thing that happened in the first movie? Well, that wasn't that big of a deal compared to the sequel's big conflict. No, like they made the first movie be they made it so important where it's causing everything else to happen. It is an important event. And I really like how they did that. Going back to the characters though, Spider Woman, both Spider Woman, Gwen Stacy, I kind of already talked about. They definitely dive deep into her character, her comic book origin, and her comic book story. Love it. Spider Woman shows up. She's okay. She's a pregnant spider person on a bike. I don't know much about Spider Woman. Her character was good, but it wasn't. They didn't put like the spotlight. Her character is more of like the straight character, like the straight character in between Miguel O'Hara and Gwen Stacy. And Miguel O'Hara is Spider 2099. He is, as the trailers put it, the antagonist, not a villain of sorts, the antagonist, the philosophy, the other side of the spectrum of Miles Morales and the other Spider people. He questions the saving the people quo of what a Spider-Man usually does. And he's such an interesting character. Oscar Isaac just plays him beautifully. I enjoy his performance, and it's so weird because I keep hearing. I just watched Force Awakens, so I keep hearing Poe Dameron, and I'm waiting for him to tell a joke, and everybody else is telling a joke, and he's the serious straight laced. But that's kind of what's funny about it because he's so serious, so straight laced that like everyone makes fun of him because he doesn't realize what he's saying is actually kind of hilarious. And I just love that back and forth. This movie's very quippy. Like there's so many jokes, and like every spider person is trying to tell a joke, but they also tell the joke of how every spider person tells the joke. The Flash does this too because they talk about how Barry Allen's super annoying, and then he meets a younger version. They do that well too. But this movie just it's there's like you know, they talk about the spot and they talk about it in the Spider-Verse, and then from like a 10-second sequence, you have all these spider people trying to tell spot jokes, like, oh, that was spot on, and just onward and onward and onward. And like I love how they're just picking fun of the fact that Spider-Man has to be funny, it has to be hilarious. Another funny character, Peter B. Parker is back. I would say in a lesser role, definitely a lot lesser role, but definitely hilarious. Jake Johnson is hilarious as Peter B. Parker. And yeah, I mean, I wish they would give him a little bit more chance to shine, a little bit more of an important character, but I see why they kind of sidelined him. He does serve a really important role in this film, and I do enjoy when they kind of reveal that role. And I think he's going to have a bigger role in the next movie. The Before I get into the standout, I just want to mention one other Spider India, in the Indian Spider-Man was great. I enjoyed him. Just he wasn't in this movie long enough. He's a great character. I just enjoyed all his role. It's funny watching a Peter Parker who's just like, this is easy. Everything just goes my way. It's just fun to see an opposite spectrum of a Spider-Man and in an Indian voice. I don't remember who the actor who voices him, but I'm familiar with his voice, and I'm like, I know I like this guy. This guy's just hilarious, but I don't remember who it is. But the standout for me is Spider-Punk. Hobby Brown is just I don't know if it's because like I am like inside like a punk myself. Like I just agree, like, fuck fascism, fuck the system, like take down the man. Like I like internally like am like, yes, yes, yes. So like everything he just says is just great. Like I'll do what I'm told, but not because he told me to, it's because I want to do it. And it's just fun. And like Miles Morales like banter back and forth. These um, there's kind of like a love triangle between Spider-Punk, Gwen Stacy, and Miles Morales, and he's jealous of it. And when he takes off his mask, he's just like, How are you cooler without your mask?" Like I just love those little tidbit lines. And the animation style too is just great. He definitely is like does not belong in this universe. And it looks so outlandish, but at the same time, it looks so great at the same time. And just, Spider-Man with a guitar who doesn't give a fuck about the world. Wonderful. Love Spider-Punk. Arguably probably my favorite character of this whole movie. So let's get into the story. Where does this fail? Why does this not live up to the first movie? So if you guys didn't know, Across the Spider-Verse is a part one of two movies. And it's not part one, part two, like Infinity War, Avengers Infinity War, Avengers Endgame. It's very much, or Godfather Part One, Godfather Part Two is very much part one, part two, as in this movie is really two giant movies. This movie is not just 2.5 hours long. This movie is like 5 hours long. And where they end this film, it ends it in a place where it doesn't feel satisfaction. Like it makes you want more. And it's not terrible. It's not bad. It's not awful. but it's not an ending, right? It's hard to judge this movie because it's like I've only watched half a movie. So that's where I feel like they kind of failed story wise. I wish they would have not tied it up a little bit where the first part Across the Spider-Man ends with an actual ending. And then there is a cliffhanger, but it's not like a big cliffhanger. It's not a big, whoa, I can't believe like what's gonna happen next. Like it kind of just ends like, hey, these people are here, there's a conflict ahead, and that's it. Movie ends. And so this is where I'm going to put in my ratings. Everything's top class. Everything's a five. Soundtracks, five. Animation, five. Acting, five. Story, five, except for the fact that there is not an ending. This movie does not conclude. There is no resolution. So I'm gonna say this movie's a four plus. That's where I'm rating it. Four plus, simply just because it doesn't end. Now, when Beyond the Universe comes out, they might be different. If Beyond the Universe or Beyond the Spider Verse comes out, I'm probably just gonna rate this as one giant movie. Across the Spider Verse, Beyond the Spider Verse as one giant movie. So this might turn into a five, simply because like the story isn't finished. It's not. If you go in the theaters, if you haven't watched this yet, realize it's not. It's part one of two. Part two comes out next year, which makes this crazy, by the way, because this animation style should take decades to make. Like the animation's so crazy, so layered, and every character has their own animations art. All the universes they go into have their own animation art. Everything they go like it's so everything's so different. The fact that they did this within 5 years, not just make one film in 5 years. They made two films. They made essentially 5 hours of animation in five less than 5 years. That's crazy. So this is top notch movie. Just four plus simply because it's a part one. So that's it. Thanks for following me. Thanks for listening. Please give my YouTube channel a subscribe button and a like. Trying to build that up. If you're listening to the podcast, just keep on listening, baby. All right, we're out.